Yeah, I mean, it started out with one guy, my dad, huddled up in an office for months designing a pretty awesome machine. And then he printed out hundreds of pages of pictures of his designs and a box of parts and told us to make it. And somehow we put a few together, did it just out in the farmyard, and amazingly they worked.
Hello, my name's Dave Staheli from Staheli West Inc. in Cedar City, Utah. I'd like to take you on a brief tour of our dew simulation process, show you the machinery and how it works. We've developed this process to aid us agriculture people in the problems that we often encounter in hay production, especially with regards to moisture control in hay baling processes. We feel like this is a process that's time has come and that it's very much needed in the hay growing industry to meet the demands that our buying customers often require of us in the hay quality that we have in our final product. So we'd like to take you on this brief tour.
One of the steps that really became really important in the journey from the beginning to what we're doing now was this period of time from 1998 up through 2006 when we worked with this major manufacturing company. We had the original prototype, the 2 second-year ones, and these 9 more. So we had a dozen machines running in different areas. And it started to turn some heads, really, in the whole forage industry. I remember one day getting a call from a major manufacturing company, one of the big 3, that called me on the phone one day, and they wanted to talk to us, and they wanted us to come visit them, and we wanted to find out what it was we were doing. As we worked through that fall of 1998, and we had these guys visiting the farm and looking at the hay, looking at the machines, you know, we had one of the companies that the guy came and he just wanted to see the machine. He didn't even care about what the hay looked like, but he thought the machine was amazing. And he told my boss, Brent Hunter, he said, our engineers would have never ever come up with something like this.
We were driving along while he watched the steamer, and the guy just shook his head. He says, you know, this guy is a genius. He said, we got a cadre of educated engineers that couldn't have come up with this deal. And here this one man comes up with this machine. He just shook his head.
Well, the second company that came out, they didn't give a darn about the machine. They just wanted to see the hay. They wanted to see hay baled with steam. They wanted to see hay baled without steam. They were just all over it when they saw the effect that this steam rehydration had on that hay in these big 4x4 bales. The third company, they never did come out here and look. And the engineer told me, I've already checked this all out. I've run all the numbers, and this machine will not work. It can't work. I said, well, the only problem with that is it does work. And it took a dummy that wasn't an engineer, I guess, that didn't try to overanalyze things at the very beginning to have the courage to move forward with this. And a lot of that courage came because I knew I'd gotten answers to prayers at several levels, a number of things, almost on a really regular basis, honestly, through that whole development process. Well, that one engineer that just told me it couldn't work, later, after we had negotiated a deal with one of these companies who he didn't work for at the time, he ended up getting hired by that company to come to work for them on this project. And he became the biggest proponent. In fact, even today, if you talked with him, he would express to you how great of a technology this actually ended up becoming and how great it works, and even did at the time. So it was really interesting how that all evolved over time too. So after 8 years of working with one of the major manufacturers in the United States that builds farm equipment that we had licensed this technology to bring to market, in 2006, they made the decision that they weren't going to press forward with the project because of some problems they were having with their own equipment. And so in 2006, I took the license back for the Dewpoint technology and decided at that point, after a lot of thought, that I would press forward with the project.
And my dad was going to bring it back and start producing them himself. My mom was not real sure that that was the best idea. That was really stressful for my mom to take that leap and start the company.
I have to say, the premise that this first new machine was built on was that Brent Hunter Farms needed a new steamer because the other one was 10 or 11 years old. And now this big manufacturing company we thought we were going to buy our next steamer from pulled out. Brent had given me the green light to go ahead and design this new one so that he would have another nice machine. We still hadn't decided at that point in time to move forward with becoming a manufacturer or anything, but I mean, it was there, but it really wasn't like the most important goal. It was like, we need another machine, we're gonna have to build it. And it was expensive to do it because paying for molds and all that stuff, but it worked. Then the wheels started to turn. I still knew probably more than about anybody in the world about what we were trying to do, even though the other company had learned a lot through that 8-year process. I had a really good idea of where this needed to go. The first thing I needed to do was to get away from the pencil and eraser and the drafting board, the T-square, the triangles, and the elliptical templates, all those things that I used to design the first one with a pencil, and step up into the world of 3D CAD design. Now, I really enjoyed designing things and thinking about things, but this was a whole new world, and I felt kind of challenged at doing that, at getting into the CAD world. I knew that electronic files, electronic drawings, all of those things that could be generated with that type of system were going to be really critical down the road in the future. I made a call to one of the professors here at Southern Utah University and asked if they could get me into a program there that I could learn quickly how to do 3D CAD work. And he said, Dave, probably the best thing you can do is just purchase a good CAD program, a good industrial CAD program, and then just go through all their tutorials and learn at your own pace, because you'll learn much quicker, where you can concentrate all your efforts on that for lots of hours a day than if you were to come and go through a whole learning course at the university. And so I took his advice. I found myself just totally fascinated that it was like playing with clay, really. This 3D program was so much fun. You could draw a square and put shapes to it, then you could extrude it out and it became a thing. I look back on this whole thing of designing certain parts of this machine as being an absolute miracle, because I then needed to, I had to figure out what I needed to fit where and then design everything to fit around it. You had to design every individual piece of steel that was going to go into every fabricated part of this machine. Honestly, I look back and I go, I don't know how, I can't even remember the order I did everything in, or how I got it all to end up kind of fitting together in a reasonable way, but it was a tremendous project for a one-horse guy that really didn't have real deep design experience with those type of systems. I couldn't afford any designer or any engineer because it was really just me at the time, and so I really didn't have that choice. I had to find a boiler that would work, or at least a boiler company that would work with me again, because the boiler company I used the first time, they had been bought out by Burnham Boiler. It was Kewanee, got bought out by Burnham, and so they were no longer available to work with us. The one that we found that I was most impressed with was Aldrich Boiler. They were in Wyoming, Illinois. They had a really interesting basic design of a boiler that really piqued my interest. It's called a Scotch box boiler. But they didn't build anything of the size that I was going to need to do this large machine. So I got with them and I told them, I said, I want to design my own boiler based on this basic design. It wasn't a patented design or anything. So they said, yeah, go ahead and design it, and just these are the principles you need to follow. We needed a boiler that was specifically custom made to run in the field in motion. And so some of the features that I had Kewaunee boiler at originally, I put into this new boiler, but I added some new features that really cleaned it up so it didn't look like a big boiler with a bunch of controls and pipes sticking off all over, but it actually ended up being a real nice, sleek design. So that's one of the first things I did on the 3D CAD program, was went into designing this boiler. It was really a far cry above the old boilers that we had originally done. I mean, it was amazing compared to that. And we still use that same basic design today. It really has worked out well and is very robust.
This contains the main control panel. This is a factory built component. It comes from the boiler factory. We specify the controls and things that we want in this particular unit to meet our
The
demand.
other major goal that I wanted to reach was to step into the computer-controlled world. The old machine was all relays, switches, pressure and fuel level and fuel sensors, all kinds of different things that was in that original machine. If you needed to change a setting, you had to get your screwdriver out or a couple of wrenches and go screw some screws and make the changes that you needed to make it do what you wanted. So that was one of my major goals, was to get this into the computer control world and have a touchscreen monitor that the operator could utilize to do all the control instead of an old PVC plastic box with some switches and dials on it.
It's interesting. I think the good Lord puts people in your path sometime to help you out. And working at the power plant, I knew people that did PLC programming and things like that, and I got a call from Dave one time, and he says, would you happen to know anybody that might could help me programming with ladder logic, that might know something about that? And
He told me, he said, I've got a neighbor who has bees, and so he has bought some honey extraction equipment from down in Parowan, Utah, which is just down the road from us here.
I knew that he had this new equipment there, and I went over to check it out, and he had a guy there working on it. He introduced me to the guy that was there, and his name was Hans.
He had a guy from there that was doing his electronics, doing his PLC work to control that honey extraction equipment. He said, I'll get his name, and he did, and his name was Hans Ulrich, and so it was Cowan Manufacturing in Parowan. So I called him up on the phone. I said, hey, is Hans there? And he said, yeah, he's here. So they got him on the phone. I said, Hans, I understand you do PLC work, and I've got a machine almost built, but I don't know what I'm doing with the controls yet.
In the beginning, working with Dave hired me as a consultant. His intent, as was mine, was to hire me to write the program, we'd get it all tested out, finalize it, and then I give him the program and he takes it over from there. And he had looked at the controls that he wanted. He had made sample screens. I mean, they didn't actually do anything, but he had put the graphics how he thought he wanted them. And when I saw that, I went, well, this guy's a little different than everybody else wants me to, comes to me with an idea and wants me to figure everything out. This guy has the idea, has it figured out, just wants me to help him implement it. It was a real thing and not just somebody's pipe dream.
Another miracle happened is that Hans does things just like I do them. He doesn't know where he's putting controls yet either sometimes until he gets the machine half built. And he's still that way. In fact, when he watches this video, he's gonna laugh because he's gonna go, yep, Dave pegged it. So he and I thought so much alike. It was really fun to work together with him. And we got the system all figured out, designed the panel. He worked on the logic side of it, getting the programming going, and it was fairly complicated. This is like a really big story made really little.
He gave me a document of how he wanted the machine to work, and then I took that document, interpreted it to try to give him the product that he wanted, and then he would give me feedback, and we just went back and forth until we dialed into something that we both liked. I'm not an agriculture guy. I was in the industrial world, plastics, injection molding, and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't actually know how these balers, like I don't understand the process. So the next cutting, he called me up and I met him out at field, and in the middle of the day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, we started baling. And he showed me I knew how to use the steamer, but he showed me what the baler did and all that stuff, and I baled part of a pivot of hay. It's the only bales I've ever made.
So when Dave come out, he would come out and ask what our experiences were on the baler and if we had any. So we was given a lot of feedback. My father was baling with me. And so my father got on and he said, I don't like all these things on the screen. He was simple. And so Dave said, what do you want? He said, I want an on and off switch on the screen for ease. And if you go on now, you can push on the screen, simple screen. That came from my father, and he wanted the simple. So if you push it, it's just an on and off switch. And you don't have to see all of the technical stuff. You find that the generation that likes the technology and the analysis and what's going on, they like to watch every little detail going on, the younger generation. The older generation just want to hit the simple screen, and it works just the same way. Just let it work, let it work. And so that was one of the first things that Dave did on the very first machines, was make that simple screen for my father.
When I did this new machine, I really wanted it to just be very user-friendly, very intuitive. The screen would be a great experience for you to interact with. But we did some really interesting things, Hans and I, as we developed that, and it really, truly was a whole different experience. And by the time we got into June, first cutting of hay that year, we literally had a working machine.
And then he started building the first 6 machines. And Dave was starting to take off, so I went to Dave and said, hey, I think I'm gonna look to be doing something else. So he offered to bring me on full time. And so then I went to work for him for, I think, the next almost 4 years.
I wanted to be sure that it became much more friendly to the operator, and even that a lot of the processes that were happening to make the machine work became invisible to the operator, that they didn't even have to think about it anymore. Now, that isn't to discredit that old machine that we used for all those years before, because I had 2 of my sons. Kendall was one that ran that old machine a lot. From the time he was about 13, 14 years old on up. And then my other son, Logan, him and my other youngest son, Bryson, I think Logan was only about 11 or 12 when he was running that old steamer. And my other little son, Bryson, would ride along with him. It was really fun to watch them do it. I would be fairly close by in somewhat of a proximity of the field when they were doing that, but they even used that old machine and got along reasonably well with it.
One of the funny memories I had with one of the original steamers that my dad made. I was steaming hay over in one of the little fields here on the farm, and my dad just wanted to eat dinner, and so he had me come and steam for a few hours. I was probably 14 or 15 at the time. And as I was baling hay, driving down a windrow, the tongue of the steamer snapped in half. And it just fell to the ground, and I was pretty traumatized. I ran home as fast as I could. And so he actually looked at that opportunity, and he looked at his design and said, you know what, I gotta make that a better design.
One of the other goals I had was to do plastic tanks for water and fuel instead of fabricated tanks, because we'd had a lot of trouble with those before. And they had to look pretty, but they had to fit everything. And it was all just conceptual on this 3D program, which is the great thing about them, and it just really proved so valuable. That was, again, kind of the adventure of doing this too, because I did not have every part of this machine designed yet before I started having things made. I had steel made, I had my frame built by Cedar Welding here in town. They did all that fabrication work. The boiler was built and had been shipped to me. I was crazy enough, just crazy enough, to design these plastic tanks and design so that molds could be built. But the crazy thing is I ordered these molds to be built. I can't remember how much it was. It was probably in the range of $65,000 or $70,000. Gave them my 3D design so they could design the mold to fit around it. And I still didn't know where I was going to put the panel boxes and the PLC system. And I know that's crazy. Like in the true manufacturing world, that would be an absolute no-no. You would never do that. So I was nuts. I was a nutcase, but I was having so much fun at the same time.
So he spent about 2 years redesigning, redeveloping, and perfecting the thing, and that's when it really began to take off.
The first day in the field, that son of a gun worked. And it really didn't have a lot of trouble with anything. It didn't have a lot of the bells and whistles and a lot of the diagnostics or any of that kind of stuff that we have now, but it literally ran in the field, and we made hay that was beautiful. And guess what? We had this little touch screen on there. We could tweak things around on there and everything. And it was just mind-blowing how different this new machine felt than the old one that we had been using for the prior, 10 years, I guess. It was up to about a 10-year period at that time. We had run for about 2 years and decided we're gonna release this to the world. So I had to learn another new skill. See, I was kind of too dumb to know that you could actually get other people to do stuff like this for you. Well, I knew you could, but I knew it costed money. So not only had I learned to do 3D design, I'd learned a whole lot about electronics, got some good help on that one, but now I needed a website. I just decided, okay, I can do this. And I went in and found an online resource where you could kind of create your own web pages and stuff. It was really crude and ugly, but it was organized quite well, actually, as far as the content that was in there. And I released that to the world. You know, lo and behold, people started seeing it. But that started this release of this information to the world. And some guys were finding it. I got a few calls. I got a call from a guy in New Mexico, Doug Whitney. He was the president of the New Mexico Hay Growers Association at the time. And he was really interested in taking a look at this. Of course, Perry Van Tassel up in Idaho was one of the real early ones who wanted to come down and take a look at this thing. Bob Houts up in Oregon was another one. Donnie Roberts over in Parowan was another one. He's just a progressive thinking guy, always willing to take a risk. And then there was an operation down in Casa Grande, Arizona, that was the 5th operation. So we had these 5 operations really taking a serious look at what we were doing.
I seen an ad or seen something, I think it was Hay and Forage magazine, as I remember right, but I could be wrong, but it was a magazine or online or something. And I seen this guy building a steamer to put hay up, and I thought, that's kind of crazy. But when I was down at the Tulare Farm Show that year, I swung back through Cedar City and I visited with Dave, and he had his first unit there as kind of his prototype. and he was scheduled to build a few that year, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to be the very first guy. Let's let him get the bugs out. Well, during the summer, like always, we fought dew and everything, so it was in the fall, it was probably about September. And we just flew down to Cedar City for one day. I went and belled. I think I belled for about an hour down there, and I could not believe how beautiful the bells come out. And I'm like, okay, Dave, I want to get one of these.
I didn't know Dave. I wasn't familiar with him when it was first being invented. But when it came out that somebody had figured out how to use steam, it caught your attention, because in your mind you was trying to solve this problem. And it was kind of fun. You was trying to figure a need out that was going to change the industry. And when Dave finally figured it out, I kind of sought him out and said, who is this guy? He happened to be in the next valley, but I wanted to see what it would do. When you walked into the field and you seen the steamed hay and it had the same look as good, you would say, now did he just do that, or is that done with the dew on it? And when you found out that he duplicated and it had the look on the bell, that's a good bale of hay, and you'd see the leaf pattern, it didn't take any more selling, he just knew that he had figured it out.
When I first looked at a steamer, I know very clearly how much my first steamer was. And I was like, holy smoke, that's a lot of money for a steamer. But when you've tried everything and nothing's worked.
In fact, I don't even think we had a shop when we first built them. We built them out on the ground.
A lot of the neighbors started criticizing, saying you're nuts doing something like this, putting steam on hay, you're gonna ruin it. There were 10 more people that wanted steamers. And so that kind of just started this ball rolling. Okay, this machine is getting good enough that we need to start thinking. I need to start thinking about moving forward with the manufacturing side of this to make this available to other people.